So you are here today to join us at Barr Farms in Meade County, Kentucky for this virtual field day. And we're really happy that you could join us today. I am Jenny. I serve as the Education Program Coordinator for OAK, the Organic Association of Kentucky. And I'm joined today by our Executive Director, Brooke Gentile, as well as our Communications and Membership Coordinator, Robin Verson, and our CSA Program Coordinator, Katie Harvey. So we've got a full OAK staff here. I'll share a little bit about OAK with you and then let you know what to expect from today's event. And then I'll pass the mic to Adam there. So we at OAK are well beyond any walls. We're a community of farmers and supporters of organic regenerative agriculture throughout the state. And we seek to improve the health of the environment and our communities through that work. We're dedicated to growing ecological resilience, economic viability, and socially just futures for Kentucky farmers through educational programs and technical and market resources. These farmer field days, again, are typically on farm, and during these COVID days, have been very virtual, so you can catch them on our website as recordings. You can also check out our YouTube channel. And these events are based on member feedback we get and feedback we get from our community about what you need. So please, at the end of this event, offer that feedback in the survey, both about today's content and any content you're seeking from us in the future. We also offer an annual organic farming conference. In 2022, it will be our 11th annual gathering. And I'll mention that again at the end of today's event. We offer assistance to OAK member farmers who are interested in organic certification via a transition trainer program. And we're not just about the farmer education, we also provide consumer education, connecting Kentuckians with local farms and food, sometimes via our online Find a Farm directory or our Kentucky Farm Share Coalition, which promotes CSA across the state. We do have newsletters, and so definitely get onto our website if you're not receiving those already and sign up for those newsletters, either farmer or consumer or both focused, and learn more about all of these and what OAK has going on. So we have a few resources and an overview to share with you, and then we'll get right into the conversation with Adam. You should have a full screen view of this presentation, and you can move that speaker box anywhere you need to. Keep yourself on mute. Please add your questions to the chat, and we'll get back to those at the end of Adam's presentation. So among those resources we want to offer, since we are highlighting a certified organic farm today at Barr Farms, we have a couple of resources here, including our own transition trainer program, Kentucky Department of Agriculture's organic program. They are one of the certifiers that farmers can choose to move into organic certification. And also the National Organic Program, from whom we receive all of the regulations that we will highlight today and under which all certified organic operations maintain their practices and their record keeping, all tying into those regulations. And we're going to highlight throughout today's presentation some of those regulations. For example, in the top left-hand corner, that NOP 205.202 is a direct reference to a USDA organic NOP regulation. You will see those throughout, and although we may not call attention directly to those, you're going to receive this presentation in PDF form, and you can get links to those so you can dive a little deeper into those resources. So online, you can find all of those. It's a really easy to use, recently updated website, and you can find out more about those regulations that Adam and other organic farmers are held to and are following within the spirit of the organic guidelines. So Adam and Ray, his wife, are longtime members of the OAK farming community, and we're so excited to have them today. with their commitment to growing healthy food and supporting their local communities, growing thriving communities in general. We're so excited to have Adam here and to pass the mic to him. Thanks very much.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Jenny. And yeah, just thank you to all the Oak staff there. You guys are awesome. Really appreciate the hard work y'all have done to get this set up, and all the other farm tours you've done virtually, and all the effort that's going into this. It really shows. And yeah, I'm happy to be on here sharing with everybody today. So just a quick note about who we are and where a little bit of our journey. Jenny mentioned my wife Ray and I, we farm, we're Barr Farms, and we're a family farm, not just our nuclear family, but my family's been here for a while. And my dad and uncle still have a beef cattle herd, which makes up the majority of the production on their 270 acre family land. And in 2007, Ray and I started a CSA for vegetables on a very small acreage. And since then, we've grown slowly at first. By 2014, we did go ahead and certify the vegetable operation as organic. But we were still fairly small then, and saw an opportunity, a market opportunity to expand, especially around our CSA. And we scaled that up in the last 5 to 6 years. We also have in production here pastured poultry. Right now we're doing about 5,000 to 6,000 birds a year. And our beef production, like I said, with my father and uncle, we finish about 15 beeves a year. And we're also partnering with another farmer to do some pastured pig production. We did that on our own, but now we partner with another farm to do that. And we also partner with another local farmer who raises non-GMO corn for our pigs and chickens. And he also does our feed mixing for us. Yeah, so right now we're doing about 18 to 20 acres in production. That's not producing all at once, but that includes cover crops and just all the land we're actively farming and tilling for vegetable production. And like I said, the CSA makes up the majority of our business for both the meat and the vegetables. But the vegetables, they're about 325 boxes a week going out. A lot of those go to farmers markets as pickup locations. We do a farmers market on Tuesday and a farmers market on Saturday. We also do business pickups. We're part of the Kentucky Farm Share Coalition that Oak is a leader on. And so we drop at a few businesses that are part of that coalition as well. And then we do New Roots Fresh Stops, which that deserves its own presentation. They're a pretty awesome organization. We supply about 10% of the produce for the fresh stops during a season. And then we just do a smattering of local restaurants in the Louisville area as well. So we are primarily all direct marketing for our farm. And we do a little bit of sales to Whole Foods as well. The next slide there, if you would, Jenny. Just to give you a sense of where we are in the state. You can see the Ohio River running through. There's the squiggly line. We're in Meade and Breckinridge County, right on the border there in Rhodelia, where the Star is. And we're about an hour from Louisville, from our primary market. And what we wanted to acknowledge as part of this, part of our overall mission in terms of our farm includes a food justice mission. And part of that for us in the last several years has been recognizing that we're on native lands of the Osage, the Sioux, and the Quapaw peoples. So just wanted to place us on the map there and go to the next slide. Yeah, our climate in the region, I mean, looks like a lot of people in here are familiar with the climate in the Ohio River Valley, which we all love to hate, or, hate to love, whatever. It's tough sometimes because the humidity is intense, as you all know. We also get serious rain precipitation events that have been, for us, rather devastating. I'll get to that in another slide. Jenny was able to kind of pull some data on what it is regionally in terms of precipitation. I mean, we all know with climate change, the increase in atmospheric temperature means that there's the ability for, there is more moisture in warm air. So that leads to bigger precipitation events. Showing here that since 1958, the amount of precipitation during heavy rainstorms has increased by 27% in the Southeast US. And for the next 40 to 50 years in Kentucky, droughts are more likely to be severe because periods without rain will be longer and very hot days will be more frequent. And y'all may be sitting in 85-degree weather right now at the end of September. I am. The sun is intense right now, even at a low angle. So everyone has their own stories with climate change, and in the Ohio River Valley, we already have a tough climate to begin with. For our farm, yeah, sure enough, right when we increased our production in 2015, we saw several devastating precipitation events, 6 inches in 1 week in early July, 7 weeks in late July in 2016. 2018 overall was the wettest year on record at the time. It's the warmest July on record for us. 2019, July broke that 2018 record, and then September ended up being one of the driest months on record, if not the driest month. So there's just a lot of records being set, and obviously that presents some challenges. We're going to talk about our mitigation strategies that we have employed on our farm as the main part of this presentation here. So yeah, our main problems that we're running up against is too much water, which has a multitude of problems. You can lose crops immediately, if they're sitting in water for long periods of time, especially root crops. Carrots are a big seller for us, but not if they're rotting in the ground. We also see that the soil is damaged during saturation events like that as well. You can lose organic matter in those anaerobic conditions, can be more compacted. Primarily, that's a problem when the soil is exposed, of course. Also, we see not enough water during those drought periods. If this soil organic matter is gone, then you're also not holding a significant amount of water in those soils. We found that the hot temps increase the soil temperatures, but it's also the low temps that are increasing at night. So we're really looking at ways that we can address this: cooling the soil, controlling the water that gets to the plant, and keeping the soil covered. And so this is a layout of our farm. I think that NOP regulation refers to record keeping. So this is just the map that we provide to our certifying agency, KDA, every year. And we don't change, but if we've added fields, for example, we add the field here on the map. This kind of gives you a layout. If you look on the left-hand side of the screen, that's what we call the business location. There's a few red roof buildings clustered around the green pens, where we have our packing shed and some worker housing, 3 high tunnels, and then there's about 10 acres over there that we can produce on. And behind that, on the brown area, well, this was taken when, I think it was taken in late 2014. We had just plowed that hay field and reseeded part of it, but also I started to produce vegetables in that hay field in 2015. So there's, I'm gonna say around 10 acres, 12 acres there as well. And I'm including buffers in all this. And then down at the very bottom of the map, you can see a small green roof house. That's our house. And we have a propagation greenhouse next to that in our orchard as well. Yeah. So we're just overlaying the USDA Web Soil Survey map onto pretty much that same map that you were just looking at. I've taken it a different time, but you can see we're on two predominant soil types, the Sadler silt loams and the Zanesville silt loams. The Sadler is a good soil for us, we think, it has great yield potential if the right conditions are met, of course. It's a lot like every soil. Zanesvilles are a little less desirable. They're a little more eroded. We try not to farm on that 6 to 12% slope. And then the Robes silt loam, which is a significant portion on the right-hand side of that screen, I've found that the water sits a long time in that soil and it is not ideal for growing vegetables. So we'll talk about what each of those soils means in this next one, because all of those soils have a Fragipan, and some of you may be on here familiar with that. Some of you may not be. Fragipan is a dense layer of soil that it restricts both water and root growth. We find that in our soils, that Fragipan, you can see in the picture there, you can see a typical silt loam topsoil above that, and then you get down into the gray soil types. The gray part is actually an anaerobic area of the soil horizon, where around that is actually where the Fragipan is. It's an aluminized clay that is not alluvial, it's a loess soil that blew in here during a drought and settled into the cracks. And so it forms beyond the hard pan. It's not a plow pan, it's not a hard pan, it's a Fragipan. And if you think about, I'm not going to try to go with numbers on the amount of percolation that you get necessarily on this soil, but just to say it's like 10% of the drainage of a normal soil. Most of you all are probably on a karst type soil if you're in Kentucky. There's a lot of that around. It's got good drainage. You got sinkholes. We don't have that on these ridges. Where we are, we don't have a lot of sinkholes. You can literally dig a big hole anywhere and you'll have a pond, as long as you don't go to rock, because that Fragipan will set up, the old timers have a name for it around here, petrified whale shit, because if you pull it out of the ground and leave it set out, it will turn into concrete. The depth to our water table in the soil is in our soil, fortunately, we're about 24 inches for the most part. We found 24 to 26 inches is where you find this Fragipan. And it's difficult. I would not recommend starting a vegetable farm on a Fragipan, because when you get extreme rain events and you have 10% of the drainage of most other soils, then water sits on top of the soil for a long time. There's a cute little picture of our firstborn child playing in a mud hole that's supposed to be full of vegetables. But we had not been able to get in to cultivate that into the field for quite some time. So the green growth you see there at the front of the field is weeds, and there's some decent looking beets way behind that. But the ends of our fields, especially the headlands, if the headlands don't have a good slope and allow some of the water to run, then they will set up just like that and stay filled with water in the footpaths for a week or more. So you saw a lot of bare soil in that previous slide, and now what we've moved to in 2017 is plasticulture. And we do say it's a transitional practice for us, because plasticulture has all sorts of difficulties, especially the waste involved with plastic. But we're using plasticulture on the majority of our production, and we're using cover crops in between those plasticulture beds, specifically annual ryegrass. There is a publication that UK just put out in the last couple of years, AGR 250, which is about the value of annual ryegrass as a remediation on Fragipan soils. And basically the findings of this research, which is fairly new research. It's not been verified across the industry yet, but I'm hopeful for it. We've been down to a field day, or I went with my wife Ray to a field day at Princeton, where Lloyd Murdoch has been doing some research there for 10 to 15 years. And what he's been able to show is a yield increase and a soil depth increase by using annual ryegrass in this Fragipan. He started out on some really shallow soils that were like 12 inches deep, maybe, and was able to increase, he says, estimating a rate about 1 inch per year and lowering the soil profile and improving that soil, basically dissolving the Fragipan is what he's positing. So he's dissolving the Fragipan down as the annual ryegrass roots penetrate the Fragipan. They're one of the few plants that will actually penetrate into the Fragipan. Whenever they die and slough off, the exudates there are chemically breaking down the Fragipan. That's what this paper says. And that's a fantastic idea. This is us in a field this spring. And I'm gonna let the video speak for itself here.
Well, this is our early broccoli crop, and this is planted about a month ago. It's doing really well. The fertility in this ground is great. We're using biochar based compost from Charlie's Compost as our base for our fertility, and ryegrass is in between the rows. So this annual ryegrass is super aggressive with its roots. Right now at this stage right here, the roots of this are probably already in the Fragipan at about 24 to 26 inches. And you know, you can kind of see when you pull back from the plastic how much the root mass holds together, but also just like how aggressive it is at this stage. It's already getting bunched up right there, and that is what these roots are going all the way down into the Fragipan, and the exudates from these roots are actually what's breaking down the Fragipan. But any part of the plant, according to UK's research, the tops and the roots have the acids in it necessary to break down an aluminized Fragipan. And so that's why we love this stuff. We're using it because our Fragipan is super heavy, and this is a great scavenger of nitrogen and a great all-around cover crop, but it has that added bonus for us.
Just two other thoughts when I look at that is we did have Lloyd Murdoch, the guy, the UK soil guy down there at Princeton, come to the farm, and he took a soil core sample when the ryegrass was that height, and we found that in the Fragipan. So it's not just a guess, but those roots are in the Fragipan at that height, which is super, super impressive. The other thing is Fragipan soils are way more prevalent than you may think. There's millions of acres in Kentucky that are on Fragipan soils of varying degrees. So just a quick review of the annual ryegrass for our production system. We do use a variety called Bruiser, which is supposedly good for grazing. We do have animals on the farm, and we'd like to be able to cross manage where we're producing animals and vegetables in the same areas. So that's why I went with that variety. We got it from Welter Seed, and there is a link at the end. There'll be a link to the seed sources for annual ryegrass. We got ours from Welter, untreated, non-GMO. And if you're going to buy annual ryegrass, what I've heard based on the UK research is don't use Jumbo or Gulf. Those are the most common ones. But if you're looking for it to have that ability to break down the Fragipan, those are less able. So we do this September seeding for overwintering, and we seed in the early spring also when we lay our plastic for summer crops. It does die back in the summer in the heat. In fact, I found some that I seeded August 31st, about a month ago, that looked like it died back on me, which I'd seeded a little early, but it has been very hot. It doesn't like the heat, so our bed prep usually is we chisel plow and rotary harrow to get our tilth right for laying the plastic. We amend with Charlie's Compost, which I'll talk about more here shortly, and Nature Safe. We've been using the 10-2-8. We like that amino acid based fertilizer that's coming out of Kentucky also. yeah, and then we lay the plastic and we broadcast the ryegrass seed at a rate about 30 pounds to the acre directly over the plastic before we plant. We like to see a rain come and wash that seed off of the plastic so that we're not seeding into the holes we punch when we're planting the crops. Then we end up mowing it 2 or 3 times a season. We use a Grillo walk-behind tractor. We got it Earth Tools here in Frankfurt, and they have a great bush hog implement for that we were able to maintain it to keep that ryegrass from going to seed. So yeah, I mean, one of the big principles of organic agriculture is keeping the soil covered, using cover crops when you are able to, and this production system allows us to use a cover crop as the same time that we're producing a crop. Our yields are better in our system right now, and we think we're improving the soil by keeping it covered. Anytime you're keeping the soil bare or tilled, it's not helpful to the soil. So the economics of ryegrass are pretty good. You get $1.10 a pound roughly. Broadcasting, like I said, at 30 pounds the acre. You're mowing it 2 or 3 times a season. So let's say you're spitball back of the envelope, $70 to $75 per acre to maintain that ryegrass. And again, keep your soil covered. The economics of plastic culture, this is already well studied. On our farm, just again, back of the envelope, looking at about 340 to 450, depending on how many drip tape lines you put and what kind of plastic you're using as well. There's a variability in that. So yeah, there's definitely a reduction in water usage as well, especially on a soil like ours, which holds water to begin with. So sometimes if the soil is saturated, we'll get bottom water coming up from under the plastic as well, and that the plant roots are able to access that. Yeah, so that was the annual ryegrass and the plastic culture. The other mitigation strategies we use include tiling, which is basically putting perforated pipes in the ground so that when you have a saturated soil, the water can run through those pipes and out of the soil. We started in 2019, just very amateur level. We don't have anything like a high dollar tile plow. And there's not anybody doing that in our area, even though there's quite a good opportunity, I think. But we rented a trencher, just a standard trencher, and installed a ADS corrugated perforated pipe, which is just that black pipe with the slats in it. We did cover it with a fabric to hopefully keep most of the silt out of it. Yeah, and practices like these, I'm gonna just read this quote. They improve the soil structure, like conservation tillage and planting cover crops. And those result in an increased water infiltration, which are important for getting the most out of any drainage system. So it's basically saying you want to keep the water from being saturated in the ground, but also you want to keep the water dispersed in the organic matter of the ground so that it's plant available. And that's what good organic farming is going to do. Here's us talking about tiling.
Yeah, so our Fragipan soil, Fragipan soil is impermeable layer about 24, 26 inches below the top of the ground. And it doesn't allow water, it doesn't allow any type of roots to penetrate. The only thing that's penetrating it really is this annual ryegrass. It's called a suspended water table when you have this type of soil for us. That means when we have saturated rain events or any type of rain, the water can often sit for days and days on top of the ground because there's nowhere for it to go down. It can't percolate. And you can see behind us, we don't have any of that issue right now on this field on this end. But because of the slope of this field, if you come over here, you can see we're standing water at the very end of the beds, and we're seeing what you'd expect in saturated ground where the vegetables are not thriving. And we've even had some water wash over top of the beds here. You can see that with the dirt. And yeah, it's pretty much a mess. And the main difference here is I've tiled a couple hundred, or I'd say about 75 feet behind us here is tiled, but the end of this field has not been tiled. And when we tile, we put a perforated pipe in the very top of the Fragipan. We want to break the top 2 inches off the Fragipan and set the pipe down in there so that whatever water settles on top of that clay Fragipan will run through the tile pipe and out of the field. That's the theory, and it's worked fairly well for us, just even doing it on amateur level, but we need to do more, I think, to really clean up all these fields.
Yeah, that's the economics there are, if you do it yourself, you have a transit, like a laser transit, then you can get away with, about 35 cents a foot for the pipe. At least that's what it was a year or two ago. And then probably another 30 to 35 cents a foot in labor if you're doing, several thousand feet. We did, I think, a total of about 2,200 feet and in our ground. And yeah, the bottom there says installing. Oh, we can skip that, Jenny. It's fine. Or yeah, installing. Go ahead. We're doing the mitigation strategies for water harvesting, which when you have water availability, for us, we were on municipal water for a while, and it's great. It's coming out of the Ohio River, but we have to pay for it, and it's not cheap. So there was 1 month in 2018 when I was still on municipal water and we were growing our vegetable operation, where I had a almost $3,000 water bill. And basically that's about what I spent to renovate this old farm pond. This farm pond is below the vegetable fields, the primary vegetable fields. And we had a local guy come in and do it. We tapped into the dam with the 2-inch pipe, which goes out to that, and you can see in that middle picture and also in the right-hand picture, there's a black barrel that has a standpipe in it where that 2-inch water line goes up through the center of it with a bunch of holes drilled in it. And then we just filled that barrel with 57 rock. I think there's a video that goes with this. I don't have to repeat it again there, sorry. But we sealed the dam. We dug out 2 different ponds. We'd already had a 3rd pond that we were using. And we put a serious amount of money in investing in irrigation equipment, including sand filters, water pumps, the pipe, the drip tape is an annual expense. But yeah, it's definitely been worth it in terms of not paying for our huge water bill.
It's just the gravity pressure out of the pond. Some debris. But yeah, it's tapped into the bottom of the pond down there. It's basically got a standpipe on a 2-inch line, and then that standpipe is in a big barrel, and the barrel's filled with 57 gravel, or gravel size is 57s. And the standpipe is drilled with a bunch of holes, so that's like our first filter. Comes from the bottom of the pond there through the dam. The dam is sealed with the bentonite clay, and then we're running 2-inch line out here with just a valve where we can attach a quick coupling onto for our water pump. After that, we run a sand filter, and then we'll send that to whichever field we're irrigating, and at the field we'll have another disc type filter.
You can also see in that last picture there was a injector, so if we want to inject any liquid fertilizer, anything like that to the fields, we can, as long as there's enough pressure. So the economics of pond work, like I said, basically what this boils down to is if you're paying for water and you're big enough scale, you can afford to use surface water by digging out ponds. Yeah, we have about if you count the third pond, we have about 1 million gallons that we're have access to for our vegetable operation. Unfortunately, the biggest pond is on the side of the road where we have the least amount of vegetable production land because of the soil type that's on that side of the road. But we did see the ponds. I didn't quite see the black barrels this summer, but I knew we were getting really close. And then the last rain event of a week ago filled things up pretty quickly. We had about 4 inches, I think, in a week, which wasn't devastating, but because we were so dry. So yeah, the next mitigation strategy, and the one that I probably get the most excited about, is biochar. Biochar is something we've been using since 2017, thanks to our compost supplier, Charlie's Compost out of Owensboro. For those of you who don't know, biochar is basically charcoal that has a sponge-like carbon structure. If you look on the left, it's like a honeycomb, where those carbon rings are forming a stable structure that is a persistent type of carbon, meaning that it's not going to be plant available. Bacteria cannot break it down and cycle that carbon like they can in humus. They can, it just takes them a much longer period of time, on the order of hundreds of years, to cycle that carbon. It's called recalcitrant carbon. And we know about these soils thanks to native peoples who were using them, especially in the Amazon basin, which is that picture on the right, shows you where these soil types were prevalent. And they're able to show that predominant soils in the Amazon area are acidic clays that are very shallow. They don't have rich organic matter in those jungles. Most of the organic matter is above the ground level in the canopy of the trees. But in these places where they have found shards of clay and human waste and charcoal, there's biochar soils. They're called terra preta, and they are still to this day the most fertile soils in that basin because of their anthroposols. They're man-made soils, person-made soils that like I said, have been there for a long time because of amendments, specifically biochar. It's pretty amazing to think about. For soil production purposes, and biochar is not brand new. It's been studied for 10 to 15 years. I think it's now getting ready to kind of enter more mainstream. I think that NRCS at the national level is actually starting to use biochar as one of its practices, which is super exciting. For soil production purposes, biochar is increasing the water holding capacity, improving soil stability, increase the soil carbon, and overall it's improving soil fertility and crop yields. The main reason it's able to do that is because it is so porous and creates a habitat for microorganisms, and it just creates an environment for microorganisms to thrive. Here's us with Charlie's Compost.
This is Charlie's Compost, which is a special blend that he's doing for us. Charlie and in Owensboro is making this with his, he has 9 Purdue broiler houses, which he's adding biochar into the bedding of the chicken houses at about 10% rate, he says, when it goes in. And then when he pulls that bedding out, he's composting it. He's been working with Elaine Ingham on different things and trying to get the right balance of bacteria and fungi and all the important stuff that good compost needs. And he's not pelletizing it, so this is a product that he's composting. It's chicken litter based. He's added some feather meal to it and a few other minerals for our specific mix. And yeah, we've been using this as a baseline fertility for our vegetable operation for 4 years. This is the 4th year now. And we love it because we know we're putting biochar in the soil, and that's helping us with this nutrient capture and making nutrients availability through the full growing season, but also long-term soil improvement, helping with aggregate stability. It's helping with humus creation. It's providing a little home for the microbiology that needs to be in the soil. And we're just really pleased to be able to use this. You can see, I mean, this is a chicken litter base, but the biochar makes it pretty black. You can actually see some of the char pellets still in it, and that char is holding more nitrogen than what we think it's tested for, even though tests are coming back around 4% nitrogen. We're using it at a rate of 2 to 3 tons to the acre in our pre-plant, before we prepare our fields for vegetable crop, because it's an NOP compliant compost. So we're using a traditional chicken litter spreader because you can see it's the same texture as that. It does not work in a drop type or in a cone type spreader. You need to be able to run it through some beaters in order to get it to spread properly. Can be a little dusty, so we don't try to do it on a windy day. But yeah, as like I said, we're using it as a baseline fertility, and we'll add in other fertility products either to the bed or to the underneath the plastic as the plastic is being laid.
So yeah, we are keeping track also of how much biochar is in the soil based on Charlie's estimate of that biochar is 10% of his chicken compost. But that's before he goes through the composting process, so it's likely a little bit higher than 10%. We're keeping track of it for multiple reasons. We just want to know what each field is getting. I mean, it's record keeping, which is paramount in organic farming, but also we kind of think that there's a certain point where there may not be much more return on investment. We don't know what that is yet in terms of how much biochar is enough, or how much is, I don't know that you can get too much, but at what level is it good? So I don't see that has been studied yet. At least I don't know of those studies. It is getting a lot of attention for carbon sequestration. We use it also. We brought in some raw charcoal this year because we have animals that we overwinter and animals that we brood. So we have the chicken brooder house, which, like I said, 6,000 birds a year for the poultry production. We'll probably use 2 tons total in the brooder house, along with some sawdust as our bedding. There's some studies coming out of conventional litter houses showing that a pound of biochar can absorb a half a pound of ammonia. I think that's what one of the studies that I saw, and the statistic that I pulled out, that's just remarkable. That's a huge amount of ammonia, which can be a problem in conventional houses. But it's also capturing that ammonia, which is nitrogen and can be beneficial when you're ready to spread it. We also use it in our cattle feeding area and the overwintered feeding area we're not going to spread it as compost because we're not in the business of making compost right now, but we will start spreading that soon as a manure. There's also extensive research on generating heat and energy from the production of biochar, and that is being funded. Again, this is starting to be very conventional. It's where it starts to get exciting. When conventional poultry people are starting to adopt these things, then there starts to be a larger market, a larger use for it. So this is me on talking about the charcoal we're using.
We asked Charlie for his charcoal source because really we wanted to start using the charcoal in our livestock production. We have beef overwintered feeding area that we use, and we also have a chicken brooder house that we need to absorb the manure and create a good compost after that. We haven't been using that compost in our vegetables, but we really want to use biochar wherever we can on the farm. And this is just charcoal. We got it from a Tennessee hardwood lump charcoal facility, we got a 40-foot dump trailer of it, and we've used quite a bit of it already. But it's just charcoal that they have as a waste product. I think it was like $60 a ton, but then we had to pay some freight. And yeah, charcoal right now has no life in it. It's just charcoal. You have to get the biology to it to make it biochar. And that's, what's happening here with this fungi is coming in and it's colonizing the porous space, this little hotel that's being created by the charcoal. And yeah, it's just like, in this amount of charcoal, there's something like a mile of surface area. It's crazy. But yeah, our next goal is to get it into the manure pack and make compost so that it becomes biochar, and then we can get it in the soil, and it will be stable carbon in the soil for many lifetimes.
Yeah, so even if we weren't using Charlie's compost and excited about biochar, just the economics of using his compost for nitrogen alone, let's say, that works out pretty well for us at a cost of about $350 to $525 per acre. When you're raising high dollar organic vegetable crops, that's not bad on a per acre input cost. So yeah, if we're doing just percent available nitrogen, it is difficult to determine. That's the available nitrogen is what your plant will actually have access to during the growing season, right? Because not all nitrogen is available at once. In compost and feather meal, 60% of the rate, of the 4%, let's say, is going to be available to the plant. So there is some feather meal and it's mostly compost. But 60% is the, again, ballpark percent available nitrogen for Charlie's compost. So we're actually using 100 to 150 pounds an acre of nitrogen at that rate, which is a good baseline for most of our crops, which are mostly high feeding. We don't use quite that much when we're growing radishes and turnips and things like that. We'll often double crop those, come in after a heavy feeder and later in the season. But yeah, the economics definitely work out regardless of whether or not it has biochar. And we think the biochar has significant added benefits, not just in the long term, which I mentioned, the stable long-term carbon in the soil, but also in the short term, because conventional Lamotte or other soluble nitrogen soil tests, I don't think they're pulling the nitrogen out of that biochar because it's locked in there. I mean, it's locked in there. I would like to see the research behind that because I just don't know. Is there more nitrogen becoming available over a longer period than even just a season? It's likely. It seems possible. It seems like the results on our side that we just see what residual nitrogen should be left over from a crop. That other 35% seems to be more than that 35% is available to later crops rather than just the current season crop, which we're applying the compost for. I hope that makes sense. Yeah. Let's see, where are we at? I see some direct message. Whoops. All right. Am I good on time? I'm gonna go on then. The other thing we're doing is doing perennial crops as basically a let's gonna say a it's not an economically feasible enterprise right now. We're taking whatever we have in terms of some profit margin, investing back into longer term crops, which we know is the wave of the future, but we also don't have any production of those crops right now that are, that are giving us any economic return. So we see this as a way forward for the future of agriculture, but we're kind of stumbling along. We planted 1.5 acres of asparagus. We planted some apples, some hazelnuts. We followed a little bit of what Mark Shepard has done. But in general, we're still learning. We've got a nice 1,500 feet of blackberries that we just planted the last year that we're hopeful will actually see some economic return. And those are interplanted with some pecan trees. So again, this is something that whenever I go to a conference session, I pay attention to whoever is working on the perennial crops, because that's something we're really. I want to be picking up nuts when I'm 60 years old, and rather than harvesting carrots. I mean, I'll probably always do a little bit of vegetables, but that's what I see as a way forward in the future. So with that, yeah, that was the oldest tree on our farm, that last photo. So I definitely think that as far as what agriculture can expect in the future is a lot more long-term thinking, less annual crops and more perennial crops, thinking about long-term soil stability. You know, NRCS and all these other organizations do a good job thinking about what is long-term beneficial for agriculture. We know that we have to take care of the soil and take care of the environment in order for that to be in order for there to be agriculture for another several generations, even through climate change. So yeah, trying to end on a positive note there, but thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Adam, for sharing all of that. We do have a few questions and we're going to get back to Adam with those. Real quickly, I'm going to share his contact information if you want to reach out to him, and myself as well down at the bottom for Farmer Field Days and Annual Conference. If you are a farmer or you work with farmers who are interested in what it looks like to transition to organic certification, our Transition Trainer program, we've worked with over 144 Kentucky farms just in the past 4 years. And so reach out to Brooke if you fall into those categories or have interest. All of these production resources, we expect you to memorize right now, ready to go. Just kidding, really, they're in a PDF. You're going to get that later. All of these have links. We think they're worthy, and pay attention to your email for that later. We do have one on-farm field day. It's in person on October 20th, happening just in a few weeks at UK's Horticulture Farm in Lexington. And that one is focusing on CSA production efficiencies with Christy Durbin. We also have our annual farming conference, Save These Dates, coming up in January virtually for a few half days, and 2 in-person days, one in March and one in April next spring. And you can find all the details in our newsletters or on our website. So continue to add those questions into the chat, and we're going to share a survey with you in the chat that we really hope you'll give us feedback on. As I mentioned at the beginning, we take your feedback seriously. We are planning 2022 field day programming and conference programming now based on what we hear from our community. So tell us what you're thinking, what you're needing. And again, thank you, Adam, very much. I'm going to stop that part of it now and bring Adam back, and we're going to look a little bit at these questions that folks have brought up. So a real easy one off the bat. Thanks, Sherry. There's always a great easier answer. Easier question, asking how to get a soil study like you had for your farm. And we did drop that in the chat, and we can do that a little bit ago. But getting your soil profile for your farm is definitely one of the things we recommend to everybody to do. And that soil web, can one of you ladies with the Oak staff go back up and find that in the soil slide section and drop that in the chat for Sherry? Your local extension agent and NRCS can also help you out with that. Pat was wondering, with your crop rows and the rye in between, are those permanent beds, or are you rotating those so that you're also getting that benefit of rye onto the area of your field that's in production beds?
That's a good question. We are actually trying to keep the beds permanent for the wheel track being the same on the tractor. Permanent as in we still flip them and cultivate them, but we basically have the same tire tracks every time. I think that the rye, I mean, we have overwintered cover crops where there's no cover crop, where there's no actual crop. And so pretty sure when that happens, we're getting serious benefits of the rye. But I think even with a, 24-inch bed top and rye right next to it, the subsoil is getting the benefit of that rye. From what I've seen on how aggressive the root is, it's gonna get to where it needs to be and make a difference. So that's the short answer is I think we're still getting benefit even during the crop season below that plant, because really, if you look at vegetable crops, I mean, some of them are deep rooted, but most of them are not. They grow for such a short period of time. You're using the top 8 to 12 inches of the soil primarily at any rate. And that ryegrass is going 30 inches down.
So how about soil organic matter? Have you seen a change in that over time? Have you been keeping an eye on that in these years?
Yes, we have been, and we definitely have seen it increase by a significant amount, which is about, almost as much as 1% in the areas where we have a lot of biochar. And so, yeah, I think that the biochar and the cover crop combination together are both playing an active role in really improving our soil organic matter. Can't attribute it one way or the other, and we haven't been using the annual ryegrass long enough to say that it's deepening our soils yet. But I definitely feel like just the improvement in organic matter. I mean, 1% is a huge amount of increase for us. And we started out really low because we started out with just conventionally raised pastures that over time we transitioned to organic vegetables. Some of them we did faster than others. And most farmers around here will tell you that it's hard to get organic matter above 2% because of the saturation events and just conventional methods of farming combined make it really hard to get your organic matter up in our soil type. So to get it close to 4%, which is where we are on most of our soils now, is a pretty big deal, we think.
You've mentioned mowing that rye. Are you ever letting it go to seed?
Not on purpose. But when it comes back, if it comes back in a way where we can cultivate it quickly, it can be cultivated fairly quickly. It's not when you get germination like that, it's not quite aggressive enough where you couldn't kill it. So it's definitely can make a lot of seed. We've had that happen before, but yeah, it is not. Some conventional farmers, I think, are afraid to use annual ryegrass. At least that's what I've heard around me, and it is because they think it can become a weed pretty quickly, and it is a weed for some farmers anyway. You don't even have to plant it. I don't know if that's true in our soils or not, but at least some farms I've seen on Instagram out east talk about annual ryegrass being a significant weed for them. But yeah, that annual ryegrass has got some serious benefits if it is a weed. I mean, it has significant benefits as a crop, even for conventional dairy farmers near us. They're using it because it does so well in our soil types, and when mowed for baleage or haylage at the right time, it can get an 18% feed value out of it for protein value. It's not consistently 18%, like it, that you can rely on that, but we've had dairy farmers tell us they've tested their annual ryegrass baleage at that percentage before. So yeah, we like it.
We do have a few more questions, Adam, for you. I just wanted to acknowledge the time in case anybody needs to leave us. I've just recently dropped that survey link into the chat, and just want to let you know how important it is that we get that feedback from you. Please do. The recording will be shared with you, as well as the PDF of all of these slides. You can also find those on our Oak Field Days website and the recording on our YouTube channel. So check those out. So Adam, you still got some time to answer a few more questions?
Sure, yeah, gladly.
All right. So do you you've got those standard beds that you've got permanent. How wide are your beds and your paths in between where you've got the rye?
We're on about a 5.5 to 6 foot bed. Depends who's driving, I guess. And also the pathways, well, it depends if there's plastic in it. So if there's plastic in the bed surface is about 26 to 28 inches wide. If it's just a raised bed, which we're doing open field cultivation on for any direct seeded crops, like root crops, then it's more like a 48-inch bed. And the pathways that make up the difference. So be about a 2-foot pathway on a bed that's open field, and then it would be almost over a 3-foot pathway for the plasticulture beds. But the plasticulture beds are also much higher, so they have a steep shoulder, and it just makes it seem a little bit narrower.
All right, so switching gears to biochar. Kat's wondering how you first discovered or learned about it, and how did you figure out where to source it and why that source was a good source? How'd you vet for that?
I think 6 or so years ago, I read the book by Charles Mann, 1492, which talks about pre-Columbian American culture. And it's an amazing book, but part of that, he talks about terra preta and the anthroposols, which are the soils in the Amazon that I mentioned in that part of the presentation. So I read about it in the book, and I started to get super intrigued because, you know, stable soil carbon is an exciting idea, for sure. And I got lucky because Charlie Mann, that's his last name also, not related to the author Charles C. Mann. Charlie Mann is in Owensboro raising conventional chickens in a Purdue broiler house, which is 60 miles from me. And he's been using biochar there and started his own business. He started selling this compost product through Deerfield and other suppliers. And, you know, just by chance and happenstance, he's really close by. So I went, saw his operation and saw what he was doing. He's working with Elaine Ingham on, again, the soil biology or the compost biology that he's super into. So that was how I was able to vet Charlie. And I would highly recommend it. I mean, he's making a great product there.
With the biochar, have you and Charlie had a conversation about the pH of that amendment? And
yeah, it's in the 7 range. It's not super acidic. I mean, I've got some tests. If anybody, I tested it through Waters as as a manure sample from them when I first got it also, and I think the pH was in the 7 range. Yeah, I mean, charcoal can have a pretty neutral. It's pretty neutral, but whatever is, you never get just pure charcoal. That's the thing. So you also get ash content and unburned matter and different things like that. So you're looking for a hardwood charcoal that is, you know, a high percentage carbon in order to use to turn into biochar. And Charlie found that, and that's what he's been sourcing from Tennessee. It's like a 90% carbon based, 90% carbon charcoal, which is pretty pure. And what that does is whatever you it takes on characteristics of whatever you're adding to it. And there's still going to be some acids and stuff in that even relatively pure charcoal, but yeah, it ends up pretty neutral in the pH spectrum.
And so on Barr Farms, with that raw charcoal, are you planning to just add the litter from the poultry and the cattle for inoculating that, or is there something else you're using to bring that biology to that charcoal?
I'm just spreading it in the loafing area in the breeder house and letting them mix it and trample it and letting them make the biochar. Again, we're pretty amateur here. Like I'm good at raising vegetables and selling vegetables and animals and such, but like I'm not in the compost business. I try to recognize what I'm not doing. And so we're going to spread that as manure. The charcoal mixed with the manure. And there is a little bit of, risk with that, because if you're don't go spread raw charcoal on your fields. That's a bad idea, because it is a sponge and it will suck up the nutrients and you will see a drop in yield. I've never done this, but the literature says you will see a drop in yield, especially during the first year, because that charcoal has to stabilize, get the biology stabilized. And if it's vacant, it's gonna suck up nutrients, biology, and then those will have to be replenished and a life cycle will have to take place. So it'll take some time to get that balanced out. So you want to charge it with, there are people selling biochar who take charcoal and charge it with specific bacteria and nutrients, and then sell that as a specific product. We're just using raw charcoal and manure right now, which is, again, a pretty amateur way to go about it. But we're just going to spread it as manure, and I'm not putting on my vegetables because that's my money-making business. I'm going to spread it on some pastures and some hay fields and see what the results are there, because we have much more flexibility in that part of the business.
Well, I think we've gotten all of the directly content relevant information. We're really grateful, Adam, and all of you who have joined us today. But especially Adam, thanks for working with me to put this together, and for all the time you've offered to our community. We really appreciate it.
Y'all did a great job. It was a pleasure doing this field day. Do it again in person.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. Take care.